Hello again, Steve here with a few comments about the whole fallout or the falling away of the whole Russiagate thing and the Russian collusion, blah 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 thing. And I've never really mentioned much about this before, although I did allude to it in a few videos that I've done over the course of the last few years with reference to Trump. Which, of course, me being a mainstream media skeptic, I just looked at it and I realized I just asked myself the question. It's a test that I've been using for years now is what's the mainstream media in support of? Well, the mainstream media, of course, seem to be heavily in support of finding Russian collusion. Therefore, I was incredibly skeptical of it having any validity whatsoever. And especially month after month after month after month of absolutely no evidence. Allegations here, allegations there, all of them turning up to having nothing. To being nothing burgers, as what's his name from CNN once said, way back when. And but this mostly, what I mostly want to get at here is our tendency, because as I repeat like a broken record here, my intention here in doing these videos is to help ourselves to find out something about ourselves, right? And this is a human tendency to get invested into a narrative, into a foregone conclusion that we will we can get really messed up when things don't go our way. Like right now, I suspect there's a lot of people who are in states of denial, who are really messed up because Mueller eventually was forced to come out and say, no, there's no evidence of collusion, and here's my report, and it's full of all kinds of distractions, and hundreds of people under investigation with nothing to do with collusion. And the way it kind of worked was these people within the deep state had talked themselves into using a what they had to have realized eventually was the Steele dossier was a complete fake from the get-go. But that was with the originator of their whole investigation. But once they were into it, they realized, oh shit, we've talked ourselves into something which is completely fake. We better keep this thing going as long as we can. So we got to expand it and spend $30 million on investigating people who had nothing to do with any sort of Trump collusion with anybody. You know, the biggest thing they got was this Manafort guy who had laundered money with a bunch of Clinton racketeers, a bunch of Democrat racketeers with the Ukrainians years ago. Nothing to do with Russia, but that's their claim to fame of having gotten somebody. So anyway, yeah, it was a complete shakedown. It was a complete. It was part. I would say, my guess would be that it was part of a failed coup, basically, is what was going on. But that might be my echo chamber, right? Because we all have these foregone conclusions, because I am an incredible government skeptic. I believe in freedom, after all, and government is the worst tyrant in the house when it comes to freedom. But in talking to people close to me and so on over the years, and one particular person, I won't mention who it was and even the reference and how it's related to me, but who was under the impression that this guy, Trump, has got to be malevolent. So therefore, whatever's going on with this Russian collusion, the story is there must be something to it, and that he must be actually really bad. He must have had done this, and this whole Mueller thing is a way of trying to protect the visible legitimacy of the presidency, because the presidency under Trump, of course, is so friggin' evil that this Mueller is playing a sideshow as a distraction to legitimize the presidency. And my comment was, well, have you possibly considered other alternatives? Because you see, a conclusion like that is such a stretch, because it's based on this guy is really bad. This Trump guy is really bad. So whatever Mueller's doing is not really bad, because it appears to be against him, so it's not actually really bad. Or it is really bad because in a warped sort of way it's trying to support Trump. It really takes some mental gymnastics to go that far, because there could be something simpler. It could be that they don't actually like Trump, these deep statists. Like the whole idea of, reducing government and creating more freedom for people and so on is incredibly dangerous for authoritarians and for deep state spy agencies. Therefore, they have to go after him somehow. That could possibly be true also. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's more legitimate because usually, there's an old saying, and I forget where it comes from, but in a state where we don't have clear evidence, and there's possible scenarios, very often the simpler one is more plausible, more legitimate. And I would say that what's simpler to understand is that possibly it was just a witch hunt after him. Because in politics, there's always my side and your side, right? Especially in a bipartisan situation. So it would be an easier explanation. And I would say it probably holds up truer more, especially when we have no evidence for any sort of collusion on Trump's side. Nobody has ever demonstrated any collusion on Trump's side. Yet at the same time, there is shit ton of collusion on the Democrat side, right? I mean, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and so on were actually paid by Russians for speeches and whatnot. And Bill Clinton was paid, I don't know how much it was, for potential favors, anyways, from through Hillary's State Department. So there is evidence there. At least there's trails of potential evidence that are so far really unexplored because, well, we know why. I think any logical person knows why, but no evidence on the other side. So there's also a concept within psychology of projection, right? Whereas if somebody is guilty of something and they know it, they will project that and throw and there's a possibility that they could be exposed. They try to project that what they did onto somebody else, onto their nemesis, their opposite kind of thing, right? And and the other thing too that I find sometimes is when I throw the idea of evidence out, show me the evidence. Some people will get a little bit of passive aggressive and they'll use this back at me. So now anything that I say, they'll throw back, well then show me the evidence, right? And sometimes in normal conversation, it's a bit of a distraction. It's a bit of a form of bullying in a way, because it's in a case like this, people can go on and on and on with absolutely no evidence. Whereas something mundane like, I think the weather's going to get better because it's not looking that it's terrible weather right now. It's probably going to be better next week, and they'll say, "Well, show me the evidence for that, Steve." It's like, come on, man. Lots of things that we do in life, we do because we have a track record of something, or we see more evidence on one side than the other, so we're going to choose this versus the other. But in a case where there's obviously political motivations behind it, and year after year and millions of dollars have been spent with zero evidence, we have to be able to say to ourselves, okay, if we're open-minded at all, maybe, just maybe, this Donald Trump guy is the most squeaky clean president who's ever been. And that wouldn't surprise me, because he's the only president who's ever entered that office having never been employed by government. And that's pretty staggering. That was why I was so hopeful from the get-go. Hopeful that at least he could hold off the howling hounds of totalitarianism and, of course, economic collapse that are absolutely coming, so that more and more people could wake up in the process. And I think he has done that to a great extent, because I think if Clinton had got in, there would certainly be almost certainly a war with Iran, potentially a war with Russia, and serious economic depression or recession by now. That's where things were going, and that was basically her style. And it's held off so far, and I hope and I think more people have woken up. And and that's important. That's the most important, that people wake up to reason and evidence, critical thinking, because that's what we need in hard times. Absolutely. So, in conclusion, I guess, yeah, don't believe what you're told, and be open to other possibilities. Be open to simpler explanations, especially if there's more evidence, reason and evidence along that line. That would be my recommendation on this. Steve here, doing great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. And please visit me at innergenie.com. Talk again soon. Bye for now.